Hello, everyone. Before we begin our descent, make sure to like and subscribe to Hush Ledger. Leaving a comment telling us where you're listening from helps the algorithm keep you in the dark with us. Now, let's begin. 1. The stillness of the Avalon Theater. I'm an urban explorer, or I was. My friend Leo and we had a rule. We only documented, we never damaged. Our YouTube channel was small, just a hobby. Our white whale was the Avalon Theater, a 1920s movie palace sealed shut since a fire in 1978. We'd heard rumors of pristine interiors, of a time capsule left to dust. We found our way in through a collapsed coal chute at the back, the rusted metal groaning in protest. The smell hit us first. Not just dust, but old velvet, damp plaster, and the faint, sweet ghost of popcorn. Our headlamps cut beams through the profound blackness, illuminating the grand lobby. It was breathtaking. Gilded cherubs stared down from the ceiling, their faces smudged with soot but otherwise perfect. Plush red carpets, now a faded maroon, swallowed the sound of our footsteps. The silence was the first thing that felt wrong. Not just the absence of sound, but a thick, heavy stillness, like the air itself was holding its breath. We moved into the auditorium, a cavern of 1,000 empty seats sloping down towards the stage. The massive screen was a torn, gray canvas. That's when we heard the first click. It was sharp metallic, the sound of a single film reel being threaded into a projector. We spun our lights towards the projection booth, a glass-walled cube high at the back of the room. It was dark. Leo laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. Settling, he said. Old buildings settle. We started filming, our whispers the only human sound in decades. I was panning my camera across the ornate balcony when I saw him. A man sitting in the very last row of the balcony, perfectly still. He was wearing what looked like an usher's uniform, crisp and navy blue. His face was in shadow. My breath hitched. "Leo," I hissed. When not alone, Leo followed my gaze. The row was empty. He told me I was seeing things, spooked by the atmosphere. I tried to believe him. We decided to check the stage, see if we could find a way down to the boiler room, the real prize. As we walked down the main aisle, a soft, staticky hiss filled the air. It was the sound of an old speaker system warming up. Then music, faint, tinny, and distant. The slow, melancholic strains of a carnival waltz. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. Leo's bravado vanished. "We need to go. Now." We turned to leave, and our headlamps swept across the stage. The heavy, moth-eaten velvet curtain was now drawn open, and on the stage, arranged in 3 neat rows, were dozens of human-shaped forms. They were made of dust and shadow, featureless, but their outlines were clear. They were sitting in chairs, watching the torn screen. A wet, choking sound came from behind us. We turned. The usher was now standing at the end of our aisle, blocking the path to the lobby. His uniform wasn't crisp anymore. It was charred and melted in places, fused to skin that was blackened and cracked. His eyes were 2 points of dull, red light. He took a step towards us, and the smell of burnt meat and hair washed over the sweet popcorn scent. We didn't think. We ran, not towards the lobby, but deeper into the theater, crashing through a side door and into a maze of pitch-black corridors. The carnival waltz grew louder, more frantic, chasing us. We could hear footsteps behind us, not the scuffle of our own boots, but the steady, patient tread of leather-soled shoes. We found a fire exit, its bar rusted solid. We threw our shoulders against it, again and again, until with a shriek of metal, it gave way, spilling us out into a rain-soaked alley. We never went back. We deleted the footage. Leo moved across the country 6 months later. Sometimes in the dead of night, if the house is too quiet, I'll catch a faint, tinny whisper of that carnival waltz from a room with no radio. And I know, the Avalon never really let us go. It's just waiting for an encore. The tunnels under Briarwood School. My name is Ben. After my dad left, my mom got a job as the live-in caretaker at the old Briarwood School for Girls. It had been shut down for 20 years after a student, a girl named Eliza, disappeared from the dormitories. They never found a body. The place was a sprawling, red-brick Victorian nightmare, but the rent was free, and it was a roof. I was 16, angry at the world, and bored out of my skull. My only escape was my skateboard and the vast, cracked asphalt of the school's rear playground. That's where I found it one Tuesday afternoon, hidden behind a thicket of overgrown thorn bushes, a heavy, iron-banded cellar door, set into a small incline. It was unlocked. The smell that wafted out was cold and wet, like a cave full of dead leaves and wet stone. I grabbed my flashlight and went down. The stairs were concrete, descending into a network of tunnels. They were narrow, with arched brick ceilings, just tall enough for me to stand. Pipes and electrical conduits, long since dead, ran along the walls. I remember feeling a thrill. This was my secret, my sanctuary. I started spending all my time down there, exploring the branches. I found old desks, rotted textbooks, and even a few pairs of small, rusted scissors. I made a little den in a wider chamber where the tunnels met. I just sit in the silence, away from my mom's sad eyes and the oppressive emptiness of the school above. After a week, I started to notice things. Small things. A textbook I was sure I'd left closed would be open to a specific page. A little pile of dust would be swept into a neat circle. I told myself it was drafts or rats. Then the sound started. Not echoes of my own movement, but separate ones. A soft, shuffling footstep from a tunnel I just checked. The faint, rhythmic snick, snick, snick of scissors opening and closing. It was always distant, always just around the next corner. One night, unable to sleep, I went down to the tunnels. It felt different after dark. The silence was watchful. I was sitting in my den, trying to read a comic by flashlight when I heard a voice. It was a little girl's voice, thin and reedy, humming a tuneless song. It was coming from the tunnel to my left, the one that led towards the old dormitory wing. My blood went cold. "Hello," I whispered. The humming stopped. From the tunnel to my right, the one I just come from, a different voice, clear and close, whispered, "You're in my spot." I swung my flashlight. The beam illuminated a small figure standing at the edge of the darkness. She was pale, her hair lank and stringy, wearing a faded, old-fashioned nightgown. Her feet were bare and caked with dirt, but it was her face that froze the air in my lungs. Her eyes were solid, glossy black like polished stones, and in her right hand she held a pair of large, gleaming silver scissors. She took a step forward. The snick-snick of the scissors was deafening in a confined space. I ran. I didn't look back. I scrambled up the stairs, slammed the cellar door shut, and dragged a heavy piece of broken concrete over it. I told my mom everything. She didn't believe me, not until the next morning when we found a single, long strand of black hair on my pillow, and tucked under my pillow, a small, tarnished silver locket. Inside was a faded photo of a young girl. On the back, a single engraved name, Eliza. We moved out within the week. We never reported it. Who would believe us? I still have the locket. I keep it in a locked box. And sometimes on quiet nights, I'll hear it. A faint metallic snick-snick from inside the box. A reminder that I didn't just find a sanctuary in those tunnels. I found a roommate, and she's still looking for her spot. The whistling man of the Overlook Motel. I used to drive long haul for a freight company. My route took me through stretches of desert so empty. The only signs of life were the skeletons of long-dead businesses on the old highways. One night, a detour and a worsening sandstorm forced me off the main interstate. I was low on fuel, my eyes gritty with exhaustion, when I saw the sign swinging crazily in the wind. The Overlook Motel. A single-story, L-shaped building, its paint blistered away by the sun, half the windows boarded up. But the neon vacancy sign was flickering a weak, pink promise. I pulled my rig into the vast, empty lot, the tires crunching on broken glass and sand. The office was a small room at the end of the building, the air inside thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and defeat. The man behind the counter was ancient, his skin like old leather, and he didn't speak. He just slid a key, a real, heavy brass key, across the counter and pointed a trembling finger towards room 11. The room was a tomb. It smelled of dust and something else, something sour and sweet like rotten fruit and old perfume. The floral wallpaper was peeling, revealing dark, damp patches underneath. I was too tired to care. I barricaded the rickety door with a chair, collapsed onto the stiff mattress, and was asleep in minutes. The whistling woke me. It was 3:17 a.m. The storm had died, leaving an unnatural silence broken only by this sound. It was a tune, something old and familiar I couldn't quite place, whistled with a perfect, clear pitch. It was close, right outside my door. My blood went cold. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, listening. The whistling stopped. Then I heard it. The soft, slow sound of footsteps on the concrete walkway. They weren't walking past. They were pacing. Back and forth, right in front of my room. Step drag, a slight, painful-sounding shuffle. I slid off the bed, crawling to the window, careful not to touch the curtains. I peeled back a corner of the fabric, just enough to peer out. The walkway was empty. The pacing stopped. The whistling started again, this time from directly behind my door. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, a wet, raspy inhale and exhale in time with the tune. He was leaning against it. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner, the brass key clutched in my fist like a weapon. The whistling and pacing continued until the first hint of dawn painted the sky gray. Only then did the sounds fade away, as if he'd just walked into the rising sun. I flung the door open, desperate to get to my truck. The walkway was empty, but there on the ground directly in front of my door was a single, fresh, yellow dandelion. Its stem was crushed as if someone had been holding it tightly. I never went back to that route. I quit trucking a month later. But sometimes when I'm in a crowded place and a certain old song comes on, I'll catch a fragment of a perfectly whistled tune on the air. And for a moment, I can smell that sour, sweet smell. And I know the whistling man isn't tied to that motel. He's just looking for a new door to stand behind. The Stillwater Quarry. In the summer of '98, we were stupid kids with nothing to do. My friends Mark, Jess, and I decided the ultimate test of courage was to spend the night at the Stillwater Quarry. It was a huge, flooded pit, abandoned in the '60s, its sheer limestone cliffs dropping 100 feet into water so deep it was said to be bottomless. Local legends said a whole work crew had drowned when their equipment broke through into an underground cavern. Their bodies never recovered. We arrived at dusk. The place was eerily beautiful. The water was a sheet of black glass, perfectly reflecting the purple and orange of the sky. We set up a small campfire on a wide, flat rock ledge that served as a beach, cracking open the warm beers we'd smuggled out. The first oddity was the temperature. As the sun vanished, the air grew cold, a deep, damp chill that seeped right into your bones. It was mid-July. It shouldn't have been that cold. Jess pointed out the water. "It's not making any noise," she said. And she was right. There were no lapping waves, no sounds of fish jumping. It was as still and silent as a painting. An hour after full dark, we saw the first light. A soft, greenish glow deep under the water, maybe 30 feet from the shore. It pulsed slowly like a sleeping heartbeat. We watched, mesmerized and terrified, as a second light appeared, then a third. They began to move, drifting in a slow, lazy circle. Then Mark stood up, his face blank. "They're calling," he murmured, and before Jess or I could react, he walked straight into the water. He didn't splash. He just waded in up to his knees, his waist, his chest. "Mark, you idiot, come back!" Jess screamed. He stopped, chest deep, and turned to look at us. His eyes were wide, but they didn't see us. They reflected the green lights. "Can't you hear it?" he whispered. "The singing." That's when I heard it. The faintest, most distant sound, like a choir of voices humming from the very bottom of the earth. It was beautiful and horrifying. It was a siren song made of water and stone. Jess and I waded in, the water shockingly cold, grabbing at Mark's arms, pulling him back. He fought us, his strength unreal, his eyes fixed on those circling lights. As we dragged him, stumbling and choking, back onto the shore, the humming stopped. The green lights vanished, but the quarry wasn't done. As we sat shivering by the fire, wrapped in blankets, we heard a new sound. A low, gurgling groan like a great, wet stomach rumbling. And then, from the center of the black water, a single, pale hand broke the surface. It was followed by an arm, a shoulder, the top of a head. A figure, made of water and moonlight, sat up in the middle of the quarry. It didn't have a face, just a smooth, featureless expanse where a face should be. It turned slowly, and we knew it was looking right at us. We ran. We left everything, the cooler, the blankets, our shoes. We never spoke of it again. Mark was never the same. He moved away a year later. Jess killed herself 5 years after that. They found her in her bathtub, fully clothed, the water ice cold. The coroner said she just let herself sink. I still live in this town. I never go near the quarry, but on still, cold nights, if I open my window, I can sometimes hear it. The faint, wet echo of humming, carried on the wind. And I know they're still down there, and they're still calling. The foundation. After the divorce, I needed something cheap, something I could fix up with my own hands. I found it online, a small single-story house on a wooded lot at the end of a dead-end street. The listing called it a handyman's dream. The price was a steal. The real estate agent, a twitchy young man named Colin, met me there. He wouldn't get out of his car, just handed me the keys through the window and said, "Take all the time you need. Call me when you're done." The house was worse than the photos showed. Paint peeling in long, leprous strips, roof sagging like a tired back. But the foundation was pristine. It was made of massive, smooth river stones, fitted together so perfectly you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. It looked brand new, ancient, and utterly wrong all at once. The air around the base of the house smelled of wet stone and deep, cold earth. I bought it. I had to. It was all I could afford. The first week was fine, just the sounds of the woods at night. Then I started hearing the scratching. It was a soft, rhythmic sound like someone methodically dragging a single fingernail across the river stones from the outside. It would start around 2 a.m. and last for exactly an hour. I'd go outside with a flashlight, my heart hammering against my ribs, and find nothing. No animal tracks, no broken branches. Just the perfect, unblemished stones. The smell started next. That same wet stone and cold earth smell would flood the house, so strong it would wake me from a dead sleep. It was heaviest in the small, windowless basement, where the foundation walls were exposed. I started sleeping with the lights on. One night, the scratching didn't stop after an hour. It grew more frantic, multiplied. It sounded like a dozen hands were now scraping at the stones, trying to dig their way in. I called the police. The 2 officers who came were polite, skeptical. They walked the perimeter with me, their high-powered beams illuminating the flawless foundation. "Probably just raccoons, sir," the older one said, kicking gently at a stone. His boot made a solid, dull thud. That's when we all heard it. A low, guttural whisper, seeming to emanate from the stones themselves. It wasn't a voice I could understand, but the meaning was clear. It was a sound of profound, bottomless hunger. The officers left in a hurry. I packed a bag and checked into a motel. The next day, I hired a guy with a backhoe to come and dig around the foundation. I needed to see. I needed proof I wasn't going insane. The machine tore up my yard, its bucket scraping against the river stones. And that's when we found it. Behind a large, loose stone at the corner of the house, the backhoe revealed a cavity. And in that cavity, packed in the dark, damp soil, were bones. Dozens of them. Small. Some looked disturbingly fresh. But they weren't human. They were animal. Squirrels, raccoons, a deer leg. It was a larder. The backhoe operator turned off his machine, his face pale. "What the hell kind of animal does this?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. I was staring at the hole, at the perfect dark space between the stones. And from deep within that darkness, something shifted. Something pale and moist, like a giant blind grub, pressed itself against the opening for a single, horrifying second before retreating back into the earth. The smell of wet stone and cold earth poured out, so thick I could taste it. I sold the house for a massive loss to a property developer. I heard they bulldozed the place. They're going to build a strip mall. I live in a 10th floor apartment now. I don't keep plants, but sometimes late at night, I'll hear a faint, rhythmic scratching coming from the concrete wall behind my headboard. And I have to remind myself, over and over, it's just the building settling. It has to be, because the alternative is that I didn't leave it behind. It followed me, and it's still hungry. The Asylum's heart. My grandfather spent the last 20 years of his life at the Crestwood Asylum. When he died, the lawyer said he'd left me something, but I had to retrieve it myself from his old room. The place had been shuttered for a decade, a massive, Gothic monstrosity on a hill overlooking the town. The new owners, some development firm, had given me a key and a waiver to sign. The main hall was a cathedral of decay. Light streamed through broken stained glass, illuminating dust motes dancing like ghosts. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, rot, and beneath it all, the faint clinical tang of antiseptic that had long since lost its fight. My grandfather's room was on the 3rd floor in the chronic ward. His room was small, a cell really, a rusted bed frame, a small desk bolted to the floor. In the desk drawer I found it. Not money or jewelry, but a small, leather-bound journal. As I picked it up, I heard a sound from the hallway. A soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. It was too steady to be a loose shutter. It sounded like a heartbeat. I stepped back into the hall. The sound was coming from the far end, from behind a heavy, metal door marked restricted mechanical. The thump, thump, thump was a deep, resonant bass note that I could feel in my teeth. The door was slightly ajar. I shouldn't have. God, I know I shouldn't have. But I pushed it open. It wasn't a mechanical room. It was an old operating theater. In the center of the room, under a grime-caked skylight, was a structure. It was made of rusted pipes, old electrical conduits, frayed wires, and what looked like pieces of old iron bed frames, all twisted and welded together into a grotesque, man-sized shape. And at its core, pulsing with a dull, red light, was something organic. Something that looked like a massive, still beating heart. Veins and arteries of copper wire and rubber tubing snaked out from it, connecting it to the metal corpse that encased it. Thump, Thump, thump. It was keeping the lights on. I realized it with a sudden, dizzying certainty. The few functioning lights in the hallway, the faint hum I'd felt in the walls, it was all being powered by this thing. The metal limbs of the structure twitched. The heart pulsed faster. Thump, 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 thump. And from a grill of old heating vents welded where a mouth would be, a voice whispered, stitched together from 100 different recordings, static and voices overlapping. Grandson of Robert. It knew me. I backed away, my hand hitting the doorframe. The structure shuddered, and the wires and pipes unspooled from its body like metallic tendons, reaching for me. The heartbeat became a frantic, hammering drum. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, halfway down the hill. I still have the journal. I've never opened it. I'm too afraid of what I'll find inside. But I read the news. I saw that the development firm went bankrupt. The asylum still stands. And sometimes at night, people in the town below report seeing a single red light pulsing steadily in the top floor window of that cursed place. Thump, thump, thump. It's still beating, and it's waiting. The silo. My brother Liam and I were geocachers. It was our thing. Hiking into the middle of nowhere to find a stupid plastic container with a logbook just for the thrill of the coordinates leading somewhere. Our last target was listed as the Sentinel, hidden deep in a stretch of farmland that had been reclaimed by the forest after a corporate buyout decades ago. The coordinates led us to a concrete silo. It was immense, maybe 100 feet tall, rising from the sea of trees like a forgotten watchtower. Its surface was stained with dark, vertical streaks of decades of rain. There were no ladders, no doors at the base. Just a single, gaping hole about 50 feet up, a dark O against the gray concrete. The air was dead still. No bird song, no insect buzz. Just the oppressive, humid silence of a hell breath. Liam, ever the idiot, found a way in. An old, rusted-out pipe, big enough to crawl through, emerged from the ground and disappeared into the silo's foundation. The cache is definitely inside, he said, his voice echoing faintly from the pipe's mouth. The smell that wafted out was indescribable. Not decay exactly. It was the smell of old grain, of fermentation, and something else, something metallic and coppery like a handful of pennies. I followed him. The pipe opened up into the base of the silo, a vast circular chamber. The floor was a mountain of desiccated, compacted corn, shifting unervingly under our feet. The light from our headlamps didn't reach the top. It was swallowed by a darkness, so complete it felt solid. And it was cold, a deep, subterranean chill that made our breath plume in the beams of our lights. That's when we heard the first rustle, not from the corn under us, but from above. A soft, dry, slithering sound. We pointed our lights upward. Nothing. We should go, I whispered, the sound swallowed by the immense space. Just a little higher, Liam insisted, starting to climb the unstable slope of grain. I want to see the top. We climbed. The higher we got, the colder it became, and the stronger that coppery smell grew. The rustling from above returned, louder this time, more deliberate. It was the sound of something very large moving through dry husks. Then the rain started. It wasn't water. It was a soft, pattering shower of tiny, desiccated things. Mouse skeletons perfectly clean. Bird skulls. Beetle carapaces. They clattered down around us, bouncing off our shoulders and getting caught in our hair. We froze, our lights darting wildly across the shifting slope. A voice echoed from the darkness above us. It was thin, reedy, and seemed to be made from the rustling itself. "Who is in my granary?" Liam's bravado finally shattered. We scrambled back down, sliding and stumbling in a panic. The mountain of corn shifted violently beneath us. I lost my footing, tumbling down the last 20 feet, landing hard on the concrete rim at the base. I looked back up. Liam wasn't following. He was halfway down, but he was stuck. Something had his leg. In the beam of my fallen headlamp, I saw it. A tendril, pale and root-like, but glistening with a dark, viscous fluid, had erupted from the corn and wrapped itself around his ankle. It was pulling him back up. His screams, they didn't echo. The silo swallowed them, absorbed them. I watched, paralyzed with terror, as more of those pale, root-like tendrils emerged from the grain, wrapping around his waist, his chest, pulling him under the surface as if he were drowning in solid earth. The last thing I saw was the beam of his headlamp pointing straight up into the infinite blackness before it was snuffed out. I crawled back through the pipe. I never called the police. What would I say? The forest ate my brother? I went back once, a year later. The pipe was gone, filled in with concrete. The silo stood as silent and imposing as ever. But nailed to a tree 100 yards away was a simple wooden birdhouse. It wasn't there before. I opened the tiny door. Inside, nestled on a bed of old, dried corn, was my brother's geocaching GPS unit. The screen was cracked, but it was still on. The coordinates were set for a single point, the exact center of the silo, and the name for the waypoint had been changed. It no longer read the Sentinel. It read the Stomach. If you have a story you'd like to share with the Ledger, send it to our email. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more true horror stories every week. You're not just listening, you're bearing witness. Good night.